If you're struggling to get your guitar to cut through in a live environment using your Quad Cortex or any other digital modeler, by the end of this video, you're going to have a number of tools that you can apply at your next band rehearsal or gig. Pre-emphasis, EQ and post-cut technique for rhythm guitars. A common way to get your guitar heard over other instruments and guitarists is just to boost the mids. Problem is, sometimes you get that honking sound or a bit nasal, but there is a way to boost your mids without having that happen. Okay, so here we are in Cortex control for the Quad Cortex users out there, and what we're going to do is we're going to add an EQ before the amp and an EQ after the amp. Now, before the amp, we're just going to boost the 1 kHz range by 3 decibels. And then we're going to go after the amp on this third row here, and we're going to reduce the decibels by 2 to counteract slightly that boost in the mid before the amp. Now, you're not undoing the work you just did boosting into the amp, because what's going to happen is the amp's going to react differently to those mid frequencies. So it's going to create interesting mid harmonics which cut through more, but the cutting after the amp is going to remove some of that honkiness and nasalness. Here's what it sounds like before and after. Use a real cab and power amp. Now, this might be a slightly contentious one, but in my experience in the rehearsal studio specifically, a real cab has really helped me cut through with the other guitarist, because the other guitarist doesn't use a digital modeler. He uses a real pedal board with a valve amplifier. It's quite difficult for a Quad Cortex user or other digital user to really keep up with the valve amplifier in the room. Now, this is different going into a live venue because you're both going to be mic'd up. You potentially could have in-ears in, so this is less relevant to that. But for me in the rehearsal studio, there's no substitute for a real cab. So just behind me, I have a 2x12 guitar cabinet with a Seymour Duncan Power Stage power amp. Now, this is maybe overkill for some people, but I have found that in the rehearsal studio, playing at volume in a very loud band with a very loud drummer, it's really helped me keep up with the other musicians. And for anyone using the Quad Cortex, you can see here that I've set up my lanes to accommodate a both real cab with a power amp and going direct to front of house. So we go from the first lane into row 3. Therefore, we add a splitter at the end, as you can see there, which takes us to a cabinet in the bottom lane, a slight EQ tweak, which we can do for the particular room we're in. And that will go to front of house, and out 3 without the cab will go into a power amp and into a passive guitar speaker. Mix and match amps. Now, one of the great things about a Quad Cortex and other digital modelers is that you can get pretty creative with the amps you choose and selections of cabs. And another great thing is you can mix and match them. So one thing I like to try and do is, if you're struggling to get a particular amp to cut through the mix, try blending in a second amp rather than just relying on overdrive pedals to get that cut. You can get some really interesting combinations and unique flavors to your tone that other people won't be able to get seamlessly in a way that a digital rig can give you. So here's a really basic preset as an example where I've got 2 amps. I've got the EV101 3S and the Freeman 100 Rhythm. Now, if I just play the EV101 by itself, it's going to sound pretty good, but as soon as I add the extra Freeman 100 Rhythm, it's really going to bring it to life and create a unique tone that also cuts through more because it's got different harmonics going on, blending together. Mic choice in IRs. So your choice of microphones and where you place it on the speaker cone on your IRs make quite a big difference. So definitely take the time to experiment with what sounds good for you. And what I'd recommend as a bit of a tip, if you're not sure where to even start placing it, go to some of the artist presets in your Neural DSP plugins and see what the pros are doing for their mic placements for the different presets they use between lead and rhythm and whatever else they do. Some of the best sounds that I've created have been from when I've used an artist preset as a foundation. And actually, there's another video on my channel which is called the top 5 artist presets, which I recommend you go check out to see what they're doing for their CAD placements on those particular tones. Low and high pass filters. So one of the most common ways to clean up a digital signal when playing live is to do a high pass filter and a low pass filter. Now, the great thing with this is that it removes a lot of the harsh high frequencies which aren't particularly musical, and also deals with any interfering frequencies which go into your signal at that level. And then also removing some of the boominess of the bass, particularly if you're chugging chords. Some of that rumble just doesn't sit well in the mix. So it's a great way to really clean up your guitar signal and blend in with the rest of the instruments. So as an example, here in the preset, I've added a low and high cut block at the end of the chain, which goes to front of house. And the settings I've used are around 80 Hz at the bottom and 9000 Hz at the top, with a minus 12 dB slope on both. Now, I find this is quite a good starting point, and you might find you need to adjust depending on the tuning you use, as well as the type of music you play. So it really does depend on that. Now, generally speaking, I think a high pass filter of around 60 to 120, anywhere in that scope is a good place to experiment. I'll give you an example of the effect on that in a moment. And then likewise with the 9000 Hz I have here, anywhere between even 6000 up to 11,000 is a potential range. Really depends on, again, what else is going on in the mix, how much high end you don't mind removing to remove that harshness. So just experiment, particularly at volume, to see what works for you. So to my ears, there's quite a big difference after 120 Hz. I start losing that low end, which I like. Under 120 Hz to 60, it's a lot more subtle. So it really depends how much of that low end you want to cut. Between that 60 to 120 is probably a good range to experiment with. Create a solo boost scene. So this one's a pretty simple one. Basically, we just want to raise the volume and give a little bit of a mid push to be heard, particularly during those moments of lead playing. So here on Scene H, I've just got my standard high gain rhythm tone, which sounds like this. And if I go to Scene D, which is my lead preset, then all we've done is obviously added delay and reverb, which I won't show you, but in terms of the boost, what we've done is we've added a graphic 9 EQ block, which gets engaged. And all we've done is increase the 1 kilohertz by about 0.3 decibels and the 2 kilohertz by 0.5 dB and give an overall output boost of 2 decibels. Now, this is just going to push those mid frequencies a little bit without changing the tone too much, as well as just give that volume boost, which tends to be enough to sit on top of the other rhythm guitars in the band. Use effects to your advantage. Now, the Quad Cortex and other digital modelers have a load of effects available to you to utilize, so make the most of it. Some of them can actually really help you cut through the mix without you maybe realizing. So something like a phaser can be really useful for helping your guitar cut through, particularly for solo work. Now, you could use a wah pedal, which has a quite similar effect that pushes those mid frequencies even more so, but a phaser is quite a nice way to have a subtle wah effect, but sitting on top of your solo that you can just click on, play your solo, and then turn off at the end. Use a looper to dial in your sound. It's really important to know that dialing in a great sound in your bedroom or at your home studio doesn't always equate to a great sound in the rehearsal studio or live. The only truly way to dial in a great tone and make sure that you're sitting in the mix correctly is to do a 90% solution at home and then fine tune when you're with the band in the rehearsal studio so you can really get the sweet spot in all your settings. But a good tip is to use a looper and to set up a preset with the tone as similar to your other guitarist as possible, and then you play over that loop. Now this gives you a bit of a simulated environment, and it's not necessarily going to sound exactly like the real world, but it'll give you a 90% solution that you can take to the rehearsal studio and already be almost there when your other guitarists crank up their amp. Lowering the gain. Now this isn't really a digital modeler specific tip, but I think it's really important to include still. When you're dialing in a heavier tone, it's best to try and keep the gain as minimal as you possibly can. Now a good tip that I like to do is dial in a sound until you start to hear a pinch harmonic audible, and then keep it around there. Don't go too much beyond that, because the more you go beyond that point, the more mud and mushiness you're going to integrate into the mix. And you don't really need it if you already have the ability to do a pinch harmonic. So in this example, I am using the Victor Squid Channel 2 amp, which I think is one of the Rabia's signature amps. So with the gain setting at 4, it's still fine to get pinch harmonics with, and it doesn't go too much into that mushy level. But if we cranked it up to, 10, why not? Pinch harmonic sounds good, but there's just so much going on there that you put that in a band situation with cymbals and singing and bass guitar and another guitarist, it's just going to get completely lost. So bring the gain down to where a pinch harmonic appears and keep it around that level. Don't go too much beyond there. Okay, so the final tip isn't really a digital modeler specific tip again, but I think it's really important, and that's composition. When you're in a band, it's important to consider the other parts that are going on and making sure that you're fitting your guitar into the sonic landscape appropriately. So for example, take Periphery, a band that has 3 guitarists, all fighting for that sonic landscape. So take for example their song Marigold. In the chorus, Misha's playing these big open chords, and Mark is doing some octave work on top of that, and then Jake is doing single note lead lines on top of that. So everything has a particular space that fits together perfectly, and they aren't fighting for those frequencies in the mix. So perhaps the best way to blend into the mix best is to serve the song in the best way that you can. So that's all from this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked any of these and found them useful, do like the video, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and I'll see you in the next one.